Hello everyone, welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. It's good to be back with you. I know it's been a couple of weeks since you and I have met together. I've been really busy around here. We've in the middle of cross-country season. Had several instances in which papers are coming in, so lots of papers to grade and trying to get grades into the grade book for students so they can see how they did on different assignments. We had fall break. I don't know if any of you out there have fall break, but we have decided that students need an additional break in the middle of the fall semester, so we've created a fall break here in our district. So we were off on a couple of weeks ago, so enjoying some time off there. I hope you guys are enjoying the course. Hope you're enjoying the semester. I want to say thank you to all those new subscribers we have out there. So it seems like we got some renewed and some piqued interest in the channel, and hopefully you're finding the information and the details helpful to you as you're perusing through the site. Got some interesting questions. Had a question come in from Scotland about scholarly sources on agriculture. Sorry, I'm not providing any scholarly sources. I don't know if I'd reference me as a scholarly source, even though sometimes my students try to do that. Probably not going to work. I'm not exactly sure how you would create an MLA citation for a YouTube video from a high school teacher somewhere in the state of Georgia. Not sure how that would work out, but anyway, seems to be some interest in the site, and so I'm glad that you guys are joining. I see that Crash Course is going to be making a human geography series, so that should be exciting for you all. Not exciting for me, because viewership will probably go down, as those over at Crash Course are well known for making really good videos, very informative, and so I'm sure that you'll enjoy the work that they put together. I'm sure it'll be good. Hopefully you can still find some use for the channel here, and you'll continue to correspond and join and work with us as we go throughout the year. So anyway, we're still in the population unit. The last time we were together, we were dealing with population numbers, how to calculate population numbers, dealing with population pyramids, so forth and so on. So since we've come back from fall break, we've been dealing primarily with movement. That's in chapter 3 of the Rubenstein textbook. So with migration, we want to deal with the difference between the forced types of migration and the voluntary types of migration, dealing with refugees and various refugee situations. As you move forward in the course, you're going to see a lot of the overlap, especially when you look at the refugee scenarios in various parts of the world, dealing with ethnic conflicts and also looking at the political situation. So the political chapter and then the ethnicity chapter, talking about some of those ethnic conflicts that have created those forced movements. One of the things that I like to do in this section of the course is look at the difference between the refugee and an internally displaced person, also called the internal refugee. And the reason I like to look at that is because the global community has actually made a distinction between the refugee and the IDP, and the United Nations actually has created a framework for supporting refugees. So obviously with the Syrian refugee crisis that you've had going on for the last several years, the Sudanese refugee crisis, whether we're talking about the one that happened back in the 1990s, or we're dealing with the apparent current one that you have right now that deals more with internal refugee situation in South Sudan. The United Nations has actually created a framework for that and expects members of the international community to provide certain aid and provide certain accommodations for refugees as they're coming out of conflict countries. The reason we make a distinction is because the United Nations actually has not made a distinction for not a distinction, but the United Nations does not have a protocol in place for internally displaced persons, which is really significant, because if we're looking at people and the reasons why they're displaced internally, a lot of times it has to do with ethnic conflict within that country, and so the expectation is actually that the country that they're in is supposed to take care of them, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because a lot of times it is the very country that they're in, or the government of the country that they're in, that is actually going after those individuals, causing them to be displaced. And so it creates some hardship, some additional hardship for those people, as it is they're looking for aid and looking for support, and there's really no framework in place to try to tell countries, or at least advocate for the help of those people that are internally displaced. So we talk about those different types of movements. It's really important to understand some of the major movements of people throughout history. Specifically, if you look at the United States, you look at the migration waves of people coming to the United States. That's a really significant piece of the course. You're always probably going to have probably more than likely you are going to have a question on the AP test about the one of the three migration waves to the United States. And so either that's going to be a multiple choice question, it's going to be an FRQ. I don't think it'll be an FRQ. Don't hold me to that. More than likely, have a multiple choice question on that. So make sure you look over those three migration waves to the United States. Not only do you want to know when those migration waves were, but you also want to know where those people were coming from to come to the United States. Also, you want to make sure that you look at what is it that was causing them to move from their home country to come to the United States. And so we are looking at international migration. Also, a significant piece to look at is the internal movement of people within the United States. So looking at both the inter-regional, so the movement between regions, and then the intra-regional movement of people in the United States. So the significant change in the United States that's happened is when you talk about inter-regional, so the movement between regions, is the movement of a lot of people in the United States to the south, and then also to kind of the south and southwest. So we're looking at a lot of people moving from the Great Lakes region, kind of the northeastern portion of the United States, into the south and the southwest. A lot of it having to do with the change of the culture down in the south. And when I say the culture, I'm talking more about some of the racial animosity and tension that was much more apparent in the past, has kind of dissipated. Certainly there are pockets, but has dissipated for the most part. The South is seen as, for the most part, friendly to a lot of ethnic minorities, and so people feel more comfortable moving to the South. You typically have lower taxation in the South, and so a lot of those baby boomers who are retiring, the retirement dollars will go further. So not only do you have lower income tax or no income tax in the case of Florida and Texas, but a lot of times you also have lower property taxes. You also have lower consumption taxes in the retail stores and things along those lines. So again, cheaper living in the South. You can afford a higher standard of living for less money. So retirement dollars will go further. Certainly, the weather is going to be a benefit for the South. And then also, we've had a tremendous amount of movement because of a lot of the jobs that have been coming to the South. As corporations, a lot of times move out of the old industrial centers. We're talking about Detroit, Chicago, Rochester, New York. A lot of them coming to the South and opening up new factories. Just a couple years ago in Georgia, we got the Kia plant that opened up in Columbus. That was a big deal for that area of the state. We've also had several other manufacturing facilities. Caterpillar opened up is opening up a manufacturing facility out in the big town of Social Circle, Georgia. You know, you should go look that up out there. No, I take it back. Caterpillar opened up outside of Athens, and I believe it was a medical devices manufacturing facility that opened up in Social Circle. Either way, you should go look up Social Circle. There's a lot of things you should look up in Georgia. Go check out the Georgia Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones is a pretty interesting situation out there outside of the big town of Elberton. Elbert County, Georgia, city of Elberton, granite capital of the world, they call it. But anyway, I digress. So we talked about the inter-regional migration, then we looked at intra-regional migration with the United States. Really significant is a part of the course. Also throughout human history, it is important to note that within the last couple of years, the world became over 50% urban. And that's a huge deal because we're talking about over 50% of the people in the world now living in urban spaces. So complete change in lifestyle, complete change in the way that people are interacting with each other in their space, infrastructure. All these types of things are beginning to change for the world, and so that's a really significant milestone. So in most of the world, people are moving into cities. So looking at less developed countries and developing countries, people moving into cities. In the United States, things are a little bit different. People are moving out of cities, and in fact, if you look at a lot of our urban cores, they've lost large numbers of people over the last decade or so, and they're moving to areas outside of the cities. And so whether we're talking about suburban spaces or counter-urbanization, talking about rural spaces, it was interesting. I had a guest speaker from the U.S. the U.S. Census Bureau 2 years ago, and I was asking him about suburban movement, and his comment to me was that there actually is no definition for suburban. And so apparently that's the situation for the U.S. Census Bureau. They don't necessarily classify it as suburban space. I'm not exactly sure what the technical classification would be, but that's kind of the nature of the way that suburban space is. It's kind of fluid. It's not rural. It's not urban. It's certainly low density, much more low density than urban space, but it's a lot more built up than rural space. But thinking about the reason why it's happened that way over time, with all the people coming and crowding in cities, and then of course with the mobility of people in the United States, independent transportation methods, highways being built, cheap gas, cheap land, all those things kind of coming together and creating a desire for people to move out of the urban centers. And so those are two really significant pieces of movement that are happening within the United States. Interregionally, a lot of people moving to the south and southwest, and then intra-regionally, people moving from the urban spaces to suburban and rural spaces. And so that's definitely creating a change for different areas within the United States. Interesting. And then, of course, when we get to the urbanization unit, we'll look at that idea of gentrification was causing people to move back into some of the urban cores, because the cities themselves are changing. Cities used to be centers of manufacturing, centers of creation, and now they're starting to move away from that because factories are decentralizing, and they're no longer in the large urban areas all the time. They're in areas outside of the large urban area. In fact, the town social circle that I was mentioning, off of Interstate 20 is probably, maybe an hour and 15 minutes outside of that. And so that's a good distance from Atlanta, but it allows fairly quick access to the urban center if they need to get to distribution facilities and things like that. And so you have that decentralization of manufacturing, which means that cities are not necessarily hubs for jobs anymore, at least the manufacturing jobs, the way that we've known them prior. So cities are trying to remake themselves. So that's really a really interesting process that's been happening over the last 10 to 15 years. And so definitely pay attention to that. But anyway, that's what we've been dealing with in our class over the last couple weeks. Next week, we'll be taking our Unit 2 test. So hopefully my students will take the weekend to begin preparing for that. You have your review guides on the internet there, so you can go check those out. Thank you again to all the people who are joining. I appreciate all you Californians out there who are watching. A lot of people from Delaware. In fact, Delaware one day, one of the tiniest states in the union. In fact, I drove through Delaware one minute. Right? On my way to Philadelphia, drove through Delaware. Super tiny state, but I had a large number of viewers, so thank you to Delaware for checking out the channel. Certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot those by me. I'd be happy to address those. Just saw that the College Board put some of the statistics from last year's tests on the internet, so I plan to address those and look at some of the things that students had issues with and try to help you through those so that you don't have those similar issues for this upcoming year. So once again, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you found this helpful. And as always, I hope to see you next time.